Anyway, staying in the Big 12, we have exciting ranked matchup. We have number 21, Kansas State, an 8-point road favorite at number 25, Kansas. The Sunflower Showdown, as we so lovingly know it. This game carries an over-under 56.5 points, and it kicks off at 7 p.m. Eastern on FS1. What is going on with our TV assignments this week? We have an objectively light slate of college football. All the best games are on ESPN Plus and FS1 and the CW. Like, what are we doing? Come on, guys.
Brands.
I know, but come on.
I don't say I like it. I'm telling you, it's brands.
Yeah, no, it really is, especially in a week like this. Kansas does lead this all-time series 65-50-5, but they're incredibly just 4-26 in the last 30 meetings. So had a big lead on the Wildcats coming into the 90s. The Kansas State slowly creeping up here. This actually will be the third longest running rivalry in the FBS after Bedlam dissolves next season. Technically, it's already done, but they counted it this year. That's behind only Minnesota, Wisconsin, and NC State, Wake Forest, which is to me is always interesting to see that that's the second longest running FBS rivalry. Kansas, though, has not notched a win in this since 2008, and we remember what that 2007-2008 stretch for the Jayhawks was like. Quarterback Jalen Daniels, he's been out. Word is he might be looking for a medical red shirt this year, and Jason Bean left last week's game after just playing 4 snaps. So the depth chart lists these two with an or next to QB3 Cole Ballard. Now, I think quarterback health has everything to do with this. We saw what happened without Bean and Daniels last week. They scored 13 points at home against Texas Tech, who doesn't exactly front the strongest defense in the Big 12. Of course, they didn't game plan for Ballard, and that hurts when you have to just, oh crap, now we have a whole game with this guy that we did not plan for, who has a totally different skill set from other two guys. This week, they at least have the chance to game plan Ballard in. I don't know who goes because they did that or thing. That kind of tips me maybe that it's going to be Ballard. Keep an eye on that because that seriously tips the scales in this game. In my opinion, though, and it goes on the back of this game being on FS1, Kelly, Kansas State is the single most disrespected team in this country. 60-yard game-winning field goal and an overtime loss to Texas away from being 9-1, and yet we're sitting here at 21st in the country. Yes, I know they probably shouldn't have been in that UT game to begin with, but regardless, I mean, they have not lost a game by more than one single score all year. The biggest mismatch on this game, I believe, is Kansas State's run game versus Kansas State's run defense. The Jayhawks defense is 125th in rush EPA, and they're allowing 4.5 yards per carry. That's 89th nationally. Kansas State is 21st in rushing success rate, and this is a game where I expect to see a bit more Avery Johnson than the past few weeks. He's been very, not limited, but we haven't seen him a whole lot because it's been the Will Howard show as he puts his team on his back or on his arm and is able to air the ball out. But against a team that's this forgiving against the run, I think Avery Johnson has an opportunity to have a big game here and see more snaps. Kansas State is also proficient on the other side at stopping the run game, which is what Kansas likes to do. They have a 59% rush rate on the season, and they're 18th in, Kansas State, is 18th in rushing success rate allowed.
Kansas State, the kings of the what-if rankings this year, because as you mentioned, Brett, it's incredible. Every game they've lost has been by one score. They're a really good football team. But yeah, so the big breaks that went for them last year have not necessarily gone their way this year, at least yet. There's still time, though. But Brett, how about this game? Like Kansas State being relevant in football, I absolutely love it. The future Big 12 should love it too. Shoot, man, the current Big 12 has their eyes on this one as both teams are still in, again, I'll call it a glorious muddled mess of the Big 12 standings. Again, got a little bit more clarification here recently. But, this is just fun for college football, ranked versus ranked. And, again, that does not necessarily mean a quality game. But this late in the year, to have these teams showing up in deserving rankings at the same time, gosh, it's refreshing, and I really, really enjoy it. I've got Kansas State minus 10.5. It's a 77% win expectancy. Here we go with Kansas State. 7-3. They have about the same record that my preseason realistic expectations projected through 10 games. But as you mentioned, and as I touched on, all 3 losses coming by a single possession, this Wildcat team has greatly exceeded the model's expectation with regard to performance. Only Oregon has been upgraded more than the 9.5 point improvement experienced by Kansas State this season. Let me say that again. Kansas State has been upgraded the second most of any team in the country from preseason to current, only Oregon having a larger upgrade during that time. Currently power rated a season best number 11. The offense is now in the top 10, and the defense is lurking just outside the top 20. Again, this Wildcat team, very, very good. In fact, I touched on this, they're actually better by my numbers than last year's Big 12 championship team. Again, bounces went your way a year ago. Now they're not going your way this year. That's football. But this team, from a power rating standpoint, actually slightly better than last year's team that lifted a trophy in Arlington. I don't expect Kansas to be intimidated, though. The Jayhawks are number 9 on my list of overachievers. They have a top 20 offense. My biggest concern here, as it's been all season, well, the quarterback health would certainly be there, but really it's the defense. The Jayhawk D is up to number 61 on the year. That's their season best. They started the year sub 100, but that side of the ball has been the side that's given me pause for concern, and I think we still have some of that this week on the defensive side. I've said it before. I'll say it again. It's too early to actually physically start building a statue. But I'll tell you what, man, Lance Leipold, he's on his way to being immortalized outside of Memorial Stadium. What he's done in just 2 years at Kansas, you talked about 07-08. That's the last time we saw a 2-year stretch of this much success. And granted, the 07 team had much more success than either this year's team or last year's in Kansas. I think they went to the Orange Bowl that year, if I'm not mistaken. We're in the top 5 of the BCS standings at the time at the end of the year. Really, really good spell for Kansas. Leipold, I mean, what he's got going on, I don't think it's a 2 and done. He's really starting to make a believer out of me. That said, in this game in particular, my numbers have Kansas State minus 10.5, 23% chance that Kansas ends, you said it, a 14-game losing streak in this series. It'd be their first win against the Wildcats, as you mentioned, since 2008. Brett, I know you don't get into your age a whole lot. I'm going to get into mine. Dude, I was in high school the last time Kansas beat Kansas State. Look at me. I'm not in high school anymore. It's been a long time.
Oh, boy, this is just a show of the road favorites, isn't it, I guess? I'm not sure if this line bakes in the possibility of Kansas being without their top 2 quarterbacks, at least at full health. Yeah. Now, the one thing that we do have to consider that I think is worth considering is that Jalen Daniels can still play one more game this season before he burns his red shirt. With Cincinnati on tap, this is probably the game you play him, especially if Bean isn't 100% or even can't go. So this could be a game in which Jalen Daniels plays. Now, I don't expect to hear anything about that until an hour before kickoff, because coaches always talk about competitive advantage, and I usually laugh that off when we're talking about the type of coaches that are saying, well, it's a competitive advantage between my awful backup and my all-star starter that everyone knows is good. But in this case, I do think it actually is a competitive advantage to not show your hand whatsoever on any of these 3 quarterbacks, because they all bring something different to the table. They all bring a different game plan. So you can hide your game plan entirely until, 1 or 2 or all 3 trot out in their pads and start warming up pregame. I think that's when we're going to know who's playing for Kansas. So I understand the trepidation to be like, well, I'm not laying the points with Kansas State because I don't know who's playing with a quarterback. I'm still laying Kansas State. I think they're a dominant team. It's now the point where, Kelly, I have them 2 points lower than Oklahoma on my power ratings.
Yeah, I mean, they're right there. This is a team, like I said, they're better than last year's team that won a trophy. It's a very, very good football team that's a couple bounces, a couple decisions away from being right in the mix for the number 1 spot in the CFP rankings. Yep.
Seriously, if you you do your what-if rankings, if you flip every one-score result, Kansas State's undefeated. Yep. So this is a team that I'm laying the points with. I don't believe Kansas is on that level. They've been playing above expectation. They've been playing really well. Kansas State's dominated this series. They're a dominant team. They're going to be able to run the ball all over them. This is Kansas State for me.
The difference for me, the difference for me in the power ratings, Brett, is I just looked it up, less than 2 points. I have Oklahoma 22.1, Kansas State 20.3.
Yeah, do you think that I know we saw the result of Oklahoma losing to Kansas, but I don't think that if you line this today that you'd have Oklahoma just being an 8-point favorite. So think about that.
No. Yeah, agreed.
Right. So, yeah, this is Kansas State for me.